Just a spoiler, Netflix is much better. At least there is a happy ending.
First of all, thank you to Reichman University and the ICT and to Boaz for inviting me. On the day that we mark the anniversary of the most meaningful terror attack, I think it is a good time to reflect back on what happened and what...
At this very hour, 21 years ago, New York's skyline has changed, and with it the world. I would like to take a moment to pay my respects and express my condolences to Ambassador Knights, whom you saw here, our fellow agencies, and our friends from the CIA and the FBI. And today, more than in any other day, we should be talking about what has changed since, where are we standing now, as well as about how important is our collaboration.
Although the ties with the intelligence organizations in the United States are very intense, as the ambassador has said, they're not that intimate that we have aligned or coordinated content with the Homeland Security, but still I would like to talk about the blurring boundaries and the connection between terrorism, espionage and cyber, and the challenge that we face when we want to protect our people. In the first part of this presentation, I will focus on 3 challenges that we are facing. The first is the impact of social media, which Majorca talked about as well, on modern terrorism and the traditional protection of national interests. The second is connectivity of cyber, and the third is more domestic, and that is the organizational challenges that we feel as intelligence organizations that want to go into data and AI. Now I have to elaborate a little bit, so I will recommend some strategies of addressing these challenges. The second part of my presentation will be about the Israeli security contemporary angle as we see it and how it is impacted by all of these developments. I will begin with a few words as background of how we got this far. So if we go back in hindsight and look at the evolution of the world of war, we can divide it into 4 key stages. The first era was the conventional war era, where an army fought an army for control over territory. Some would call it the banner or flag era, where in 2 world wars we saw that it was not economic, where there were too many casualties, and recently we are seeing a reminder of it in Ukraine, and therefore it led the world to enter into the second era, the bomb era, the super conventional warfare, where nuclear bombs can make decisive victory easier, and we can just use knowledge. Just by knowing that you have a bomb, you can win the war. But because this weapon is not only powerful, but too powerful to the point that you cannot use it, we have entered the third phase, which is the subconventional or terror era, where the weakness of those who are strong came to be seen. Terror is spread across the public, and we see that it can make governments collapse, whereas the country itself is finding it hard to use its power and use its edge. A few words, or to zoom in on the change in the world of terror today. The world of terror is undergoing significant change. Organizational terrorism has met the intelligence organizations in its comfort zone, just like a spider and its web. You build a web and you can usually find a foothold in a large percentage of coverage and thwarting of the enemy's intentions. In recent years, however, alongside organizational terrorism, new methods of terror have been developed. State terrorism on the one end of the spectrum, and local terrorism or even inspirational terrorism on the other end, which is not guided or steered by an organization. It's not even ideological. And so when you try to build this web, it is still relevant for organizational terror. However, you need different coverage, different collection methods, even different predicting methods when you want to target the decentralized terror that doesn't come from an organization, doesn't have an anchor. In recent months and years, we have been witness to an Iranian state terrorism or a sub-state Hamas terrorism that uses this decentralized terrorism by giving weapons, giving ideas, spreading them online, and creating an amorphic kind of structure of terrorism and still remaining immune. Hamas will not hesitate to use personal distress and weaknesses among the Palestinians in order to have them enter the world of terrorism. The fourth age is the cyber warfare age. That has brought another aspect into play, and you can actually utilize another point of weakness of strong states through one of its powers, and that is connectivity. Cyber leads to a new translation of espionage, terrorism, and influence terminology, and means that intelligence organizations need not only to become experts in a new field, but a new task to protect democracy and its values from the inherent weakness of it. It's no wonder, therefore, that discourse nowadays engages not only on the public's right to know, but its right to also receive facts and information, which raises the question: who will determine what is factual information and what is not? The State of Israel as a democracy that is organizationally and state-wise, not organization, not terror, is very much impacted by this. Within the cyber age, or as a sub-era of this fourth era, there is a challenge that is created by the social media. The state in general and to intelligence organizations like us in particular, because of the combined role played by these organizations, protecting the security but also defending democracy. The impact of social media, how fast knowledge is distributed and how there is no supervision, means that the masses can be mobilized and a victory shot can be given. And that is why the traditional national perception of Israel, the security perception, which is deterrence, which is warning, victory, and defense, requires another new aspect, and that is influence or impact. And to make it even further complicated, whereas neutralizing this impact externally seems like one of the rules of the game, doing it domestically can create a slippery slope. And the intervention of intelligence organizations in the regime can actually be a problem, and we need to prevent it. And these are the kind of dilemmas that we are facing now against the backdrop of the 2022 election campaign, creating a wall from protecting us from external impact, but also grappling with internal impact. So the bad news is, from what I've said so far, is that while we are grappling with terrorism and we have not been freed from having to deal with suicide bombers in the kinetic world, we also need to discover spyware from the cyber world. But the good news is that these agile organizations that will change their methods and even organizational structures will change quickly. They'll be able to grapple with the cyber world and even utilize its advantages for phenomena in the cyber world. So the good news is that this introduction is now over, and the bad news is that there's more to come in this presentation. So the first challenge is the social media challenge. The power of the social media is not only in its ability to reflect a phenomenon, but to actually create a cognition or awareness, and that is under the nose of democracy and adhering to freedom of expression. And because social media is unsupervised, the liberal world is in an intergenerational crisis and is facing a huge challenge, which is the challenge of the regime of the rule because of the COVID pandemic. The intergenerational crisis means that the moderate sort of parental, religious or social powers or authority no longer have the same power. Instead, we have bots. Instead, we have opinion leaders in the social media. They don't have patriarchal. They don't have tribal leadership, and they don't adhere to it. And the friendly alternative to social media undermines the school's status, teachers' status, and so narratives that are driven by interest are happening. And there is less trust in state authorities and state establishments, and there is less support, and they also are not as threatening. And in this flat world of information, the state is losing its advantages when it faces radical organizations. The education system is fighting or competing with the Post and the social media, and the educator has to compete with YouTube. The algorithms that are learning us more and more, and they are looking for attention, are making us feel more violent and more enraged. And if you are more blunt, you are out there and you are heard more. And the youth are left very much exposed. This is a new battlefield, and the different intelligence and security organizations need to grapple with it. Incitement means that there are mass phenomena, that there are young people who are not mature enough, who are being harnessed and mobilized, and so the collection methods, traditional collection methods, are being challenged. And it is no wonder, therefore, that when it comes to the violent phenomena that we have seen in recent months, from the Guardian of the Wall riots to the Temple Mount riots in the last Ramadan, to parts of the youth of the Hill, we find the youth between the ages of 18 and 24 engaged in these activities. This generation has no shepherd, has no leader, and they find the inspiration terrorism is something that we can do. It's a threat that can be led, and all we need to do is find ears that are willing to listen, and you create a kind of awareness that will convince them to take action.
The social media, together with the technology of deep fake, enable that rather easily. In the last era, the Hamas managed through Gaza to convince young people that Al-Aqsa is in danger, with pictures, with insights brought about riots by young people. And the main rioters you cannot even define as religious Muslims. I think that anybody who played football close to the mosque and condemned Aqsa, he fulfills the decrees of Islam. And these are games of chess with somebody else's courtyard. In democratic countries, our perceptions, our mission in the Shabak is to maintain democracy and the democratic establishment. That's the most challenging and adds to us, as Menachem Begin said, another drop of responsibility. It hints to the fact that we cannot forget our duty. The real significance of our mission is a total balance between using authority and power and maintaining the freedoms of the individuals. And this is a very tense democracy, not exactly a democracy. For that, we have to create a response restraint to the challenge created by the social media. Therefore, I think that the strategy, the balanced strategy, includes the following layers. The first layer is a combination of forces with the media to create an ethical code that will enable the state and the media to deal with incitement while maintaining the freedom of speech. Second layer is regulation, which compels the companies time to market to close profiles and to be prepared by technology as far as laws of a country. The third layer is to monitor in order to detect immediately any incitement in the social media, and also enforcement, the right enforcement to cope with in the cyber world. The second challenge presented by cyber, advanced countries usually have a high connectivity, and you can say that countries with high connectivity become advanced. But this is also their weaker point for those people who take advantage of it, both countries and people. Vis-a-vis these phenomena, the physical borders of a country are no longer the borderline. Today, you don't have to go in a hidden part of the border, as Shabta used to do at the time, in order to obtain intelligence or to create impact or to hit. It's enough to skip between the servers on the web. Professor Ari said that imperialism in the modern world is not measured in the number of boots on the ground, but on the number of access to servers. And the servers are less protected than a state. Countries must invest today in protecting cyber, no less than investing protecting the borders, because if it is open, you have CNE, CNS attacks, and it brings about loss of information, exposure of secrets, jeopardizing infrastructure, lack of economic security and such. The tendency not to enforce protection in the private sector, even those who keep databases, in order to advance an industry without budget, at the end of the day, it's going to jeopardize the businesses, the market, the labor market, and the state. Quite obvious that because of all these attacks, you have to protect more than the investment to stop it or to prevent it. The strategy of response vis-a-vis this challenge is made up of regulation and the two layers of cooperation. As for the development, similar to the active protection against missiles in the cyber world, which was developed in the military industry, the Shabak wants to create a cyber Iron Dome. It's not going to come up to the level of success of the regular Iron Dome, but it definitely will create a better defense to the Israeli economy, to analyze the data and to prevent anomalies. The regulatory response, the state has to create maintaining a database in order to adapt the definition of infrastructure for this period. It's inconceivable that a hospital in the state of Israel will not be defined as a critical area. Together with that, and in order to create information about attacks in real time, we need another two levels of cooperations. One is vis-a-vis the private market with intelligence, insights, and to prevent the enemy from accessing those businesses. Because of that, we need more cooperation. And I'm talking not about the content, but you can get to it in a combination of regulation together with dividends to private businesses. For example, insurance policies. And the state has to do more and quicker in this realm. The second cooperation is vis-a-vis Western countries who suffer from attacks of those same opponents. Here we offer to our like-minded states to create fusion grid or an Interpol cyber, an online cooperation of countries. If we look at the history in the past, I think not in vain, Ambassador Knights spoke about that, to create a protection convention. You know, the prince of this country would marry the princess of another country, and then these conventions became with the military maneuvers among these countries. But in this area, we need a network of cooperations between the intelligence bodies of the various countries, those who challenge today the social and political order. The third last challenge is the internal organizational challenge. Organizations who live by tradition and will not change will not be able to sustain the new threats which is facing us with cyber. The most advanced collection of also encoding content, and it's all based on data science of the mega data, and something that will enable us to support such insights by itself. In order to create such a culture of to have intelligence in this way, the organizations themselves, the IT world, information technology has to turn actually to IM, informational management, the technology of managing information. They have to become creators of intelligence and of database and melting them. The BDO organization, data-based organization, great storage and great use of AI in order to monitor anomalies and to create insights. The third layer is to create data accelerators of experts within the professional disciplines, people on the ground or our coordinators, in order to get to the potential of data in the professional world. But having said all that, the culture of doubting data, the intelligence insights usually will be statistic. And in order to make decisions, we'll have to understand the capabilities and the limitations of any algorithm, and still to get information from other sources and to make a good intelligence decision based on AI. And having said all that, we still don't have an alternative for intuition and for experience. So before summarizing this part, I think it'll be right to take the phenomenon of ISIS as a case study. The ISIS is a decentralized organization. The active actors are dispersed all over, and the battle is in the web. The impact and calling for action is through messages and inspiration. Just last year, we had an experience of very big attacks of the ISIS in Israel, and we arrested 71 terrorists of Daesh. The Salafist ideology is legitimate, but the Salafist idea is not legitimate. But the passage between the two is very quick. It's very personal. The imitation is happening in the field. And here the right action of a state is to fight them, but still to restrain its force. First of all, you have a contract with social organizations to locate any community intelligence, somebody that doesn't behave regularly. All the contents that are identified with ISIS, and also cooperations internationally between the Western organization and creating possible mechanism in order to detect suspicions. So in order to finalize the first part, we're talking about cooperation between the country and the private sector, and countries between other countries. Technological changes, intelligence within organizations will be a prevention to all these world tendency who expose democracies to the extent of threatening its existence. But let's not be mistaken. The intelligence organization cannot replace governments. They are not there in order to create social challenge. Even in the national resilience, in the good case, we can maybe stop the hemorrhage, but we cannot deal or treat the disease. Countries should recognize the challenge of the web and of the social media, and to create laws accordingly. In the second part, I'd like to talk in brief about the major challenges of national security.
Before I begin, I would like to say that we are currently in an area that is not simple. Obviously, there were others before us, and we have many challenges to face. The National Security Agency cannot promise, unfortunately, 100% success rate in thwarting terrorism, but we can promise 150% effort. The men and women in the ISA are the top professionals in the state of Israel. They are toiling and they are working hard. They are very much aware of the challenges, especially at this time. I meet them every single day on the ground in the different labs. We have our partners with the IDF, the police force, and the Mossad, and I'm very proud to be having these people as my people at the forefront. The state of Israel is currently grappling with 5 different arenas. The first, After 25 years of a world that was characteristically but one polar, Israel is now in a tripolar world. Alongside the various characteristics of the Cold War, the fact that there are three players and not two that are fighting over national interests more than over ideology, there are other characteristics that are similar, such as the struggle that is evolving around third-party states or the updated domino policy. The cyber arena that was not around then means that we can keep not shooting at one another but still achieving our goals in other ways. The three great powers have different interests in the Middle East, and facing all three, Israel has different interests. Even though there has not been a dramatic change in the number of boots on the ground from the United States in the Middle East, the image of the forces coming out of Afghanistan is interpreted as the United States leaving this area and is a catalyst and also a tailwind for fundamentalists in the region. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Romans, Ottomans, and British in the Middle East, there is no vacuum. In this context, President Biden's visit and the renewed dialogue with Saudi Arabia can be encouraging. If this trend will continue, Israel will have to continue becoming valuable and remaining valuable to the United States. And Israel must be positioned on the U.S. street, on campuses in Congress and in the U.S. administration is crucial to its security. The second challenge we are facing is the Shiite axis. Iran, as long as it is continually under fundamentalist regime, will continue to expand, will continue to threaten Sunni hegemony and Israel. Iran's influence is seen in the terror arena, wherever it is, whether it is the ring countries, whether it is the Palestinian arena, whether it is Israel or cyber. Iran is the first of the axis to most phenomena in the region, and it plays a key role in the instability that we are feeling in the Palestinian arena as well. Iran is not only a nuclear problem, it is the fundamental problem of the Middle East. It is no wonder, therefore, that in the last round of fighting in Operation Breaking Dawn, the two leaders of the Islamic Jihad were sitting comfortably in Iran, did not want to stop the fire that was killing its subjects. And if we take the fight against Islamic Jihad as an example, we'll say that the State of Israel was established in 1948 under a UN resolution. Islamic Jihad was founded in 1983 when the terror organizations were rearing their ugly head and inspired by the Khomeini revolution of 1979. Islamic Jihad is supported by Iran and Syria. Israel is an ally of the United States and the UK. The Islamic Jihad is shooting at civilians. The State of Israel is differentiating between terrorists and civilians. In the last round of fighting, we suspended attacks for 3 hours because we could not prove the target, and we wanted those who were innocent to not be involved and not be hurt. And when there were children in the area, we also suspended our attack. We're not hesitant. The IDF and our ISA is not hesitant. It is powerful, and that is the essence of the difference between the Zionist model and the Iranian one. And that is just one small example of the negative Iranian impact on this region. We can only imagine the scope of a future impact if a nuclear agreement will be signed, and Iran will have $85 million more, some of which will obviously be designated for terror and for influence to bolster organizations such as the Islamic Jihad. The third challenge lies in the Palestinian arena, which is currently divided into Fatah land in the West Bank and Hamastan in the Gaza Strip. In both areas, the two leaders will be required to make bold decisions. Abu Mazen, while the status of the Palestinian Authority is weakening, will have to understand that at present he can develop economically, he can improve the civilian fabric of life, but not more than that. He will have to unite Fatah, he will have to strengthen the security apparatuses, and he will have to revolutionize the way he rules. But in the Gaza Strip, we are in a closed circuit. There are many terror axes, and there's not enough leadership, and therefore the IDF has to take action and must actually provide an umbrella of protection for the civilians of Israel. The price that we pay is Palestinian casualties, among others, and also a drop in the status of the security apparatuses. In the last 12 months, we have had more than 130 shootings, as opposed to 98 in all of 2021 and 19 in 2020. This is just one more expression of the lack of sovereignty, the lack of governability. But at the same time, we have thwarted 312 main attacks, which are stabbings, suicide, car attacks. We have arrested dozens, and also we have arrested those who deal in weapons. And we are trying to quiet things by working together with the Palestinian security apparatuses. The Palestinians also want this, but for this tango, we need two. It takes two to tango. In the Gaza Strip, Yahya Sinwar will have to pick whether he wants to engage in Mukawama and resistance, or if he wants to improve things for his civilians, because you cannot control the population on the one hand and not to do good by it, but on the other hand to incite and to order attacks. You cannot use explosives, and you cannot use missiles, and you cannot use words. Israel should also add an account of incitement and an account for directing terror attacks outside the Gaza Strip. Yahya Sinwar will have to understand that the way he's been going will not work anymore. But the public in the Gaza Strip have also had a taste of coexistence. We have workers coming in from the Gaza Strip into Israel to work every single day, and they are getting to know Israelis for the first time since 2001, not through Al Jazeera or through the weapons. And this public will have to exert pressure on Sinwar. He will have to stop guiding and directing terror attacks. He will have to stop inciting. He will have to start focusing on rehabilitating the Gaza Strip and to take care of the Palestinian public. He can either use words or he can have workers coming in. And there's also the domestic governability in terms of the Israeli Arab society. In this matter, we are facing a dual test for Israel and for society. Another attack, such as the events that we saw during Operation Guardian of the Walls, may be irrevocable when it comes to the integration of both sides of society. We see the moderating and restraining elements becoming more powerful, and that can be hopeful. Before I get to the recommendations, I want to make note of several things. First of all, the Israeli Arab society wants integration. The normative majority understands the alternatives and prefers evolution to revolution. This trend is a little different in the Negev in southern Israel, where integration is still problematic, where they have many other challenges to face. But I would say, let us not forget the actors, the athletes, the singers, the physicians, and certainly the soldiers and officers who are from the Arab society and who are enriching security, culture, and knowledge in Israel, and are creating for our society a multifaceted approach. The Israeli Arab society has a growing trend whereby criminal families are overtaking the regular life, and people cannot provide their children with security. There are gaps in Israeli Arab society. They have problems with language. They have barriers with education, polygamy, which means that they cannot identify because they are marrying Palestinian women and others. And here, too, the intergenerational crisis is challenging the traditional leadership and even the patriarchal structure, and makes it harder for these leadership to stop violence and extremism. Here, too, social media plays a polarizing instead of integrating role. The state of Israel is turning from a country that has mixed cities to a mixed country. Strong populations are leaving the mixed or Arab communities, and that is why these communities cannot be developed further. This problem means that the people have a baggage. People are feeling that the difference is more accentuated than the similarity. First and foremost, a social challenge, but against the backdrop of incitement, it also becomes a security challenge. And therefore, we must say very honestly that despite these two tests that Israeli Arab society has passed since Operation Guardian of the Walls in this last Ramadan and during Operation Breaking Dawn in Gaza, we still assume that the likelihood of riots breaking out in mixed cities during a crisis remains, and as incitement remains and continues, the status quo in Al-Aqsa will remain, and this likelihood will be greater. And in order to reduce this risk and in order to develop integration, the State of Israel must take three avenues of development, of security infrastructure, education programs, reinforcement, having police presence, combined reinforcement, and influence, encouraging and cultivating local moderate leadership. We have said a lot about the involvement of the ISA in this area, and I would like to clarify. First of all, the ISA will keep bringing to trial, bringing to justice anyone who is engaged in terrorism. It is because of ISA investigation and police interrogation we have arrested 271 people and 106 arraignments have been made. Last week, too, we will not forget, we will not forgive anyone who was involved, and the effect of that can be seen on the ground. The ISA is helping the Israel police force as it combats illegal weapons. ISA is investigating any illegal event or incident that undermines the Israeli rule, and even if there's a criminal intent behind it. The ISA is starting to help the Israel police force as it faces other challenges. It is supervised and it is very determined. But at the same time, the ISA will also use its trust in the Arab sector and its knowledge in order to advance positive points of focus, to enhance dialogue, and to have the State of Israel invest more in this population. And the final challenge, if until now it was not complex, then the most complex challenge is the challenge within us, the deep evolving rift within Israeli society on the nature of our country. From intelligence that we read, from the investigations of terrorists that we investigate, and from a long familiarity with our enemies, we can now say without a doubt that the political instability, the growing political rift, and the fact that the common ground is no longer there, and all this incited dialogue is an injection of encouragement for the evil axis, for lone wolf terrorists and for terrorist organizations, because our rivals are feeling that historically that edge that we had for 1,000 of years, and that is our national resilience, is now fading away. This insight should be of greatest concern, more than anything else, to all of us. And in this area, the ISA can only warn. They cannot address it. That is in the hands of each and every one of us. Have a happy Jewish New Year.